Welcome to Gold Shields. Join NYPD veterans Tom Smith and Dan Murphy. With over 50 years of combined experience chasing drug lords, dismantling cartels, and hunting terrorists. Now they pull back the curtain, sharing raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines and the heroes who stood beside them. No topics off limits. This is real. This is true crime. This is Gold Shields.
And welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy, along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you doing this morning, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, buddy. Special show today for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We were absolutely honored to have our guest this morning. But before we get into the guest, which we will in a second, Tom, you got a little business we always take care of, thanking some of our friends and highlighting some important stuff for our audience.
Yeah, you know what? Big partner of ours, Copline. Copline's really special to us to get that word out to law enforcement officers, first responders, to make that phone call to Copline. The website is copline.org, 1-800-COPLINE, 1-800-267-5463. You are not alone. There's members of the law enforcement community who are retired to answer phones for you, to get all the problems that you might be facing both on the job or at home. Please reach out to them. The numbers of problems going on are way too high. Just make that call, 1-800-267-5463, copline.org. Really important to us. And as always, check us out, youtube.com/@goldshields. TheGoldShieldShow.com is our website, and every audio channel you can think of. Jump on, follow us, subscribe to us. Don't miss episodes like this. And this is a special one because one of the things, Dan, and you know, we pride ourselves on telling the truth and getting the truth out there, no matter what the story is, controversial, whatever it might be. The truth is what needs to be said on the show, and this is one of those stories. Extortion 17 was a Navy SEAL operation in Afghanistan that went horribly wrong. And a lot of questions about it that are coming up with a Netflix series called Fallen Angel. And with our next guest, Billy Vaughn is the author of the best-selling book Betrayed, and honoring his son Aaron, who was on that mission, is joining us today for a very special episode to get the truth out, this story out there, which is desperately needed. So, Billy Vaughn, welcome to Gold Shields, my friend, and it is an honor.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Dan. Thank you guys for having me this morning. I appreciate it very much.
It's our pleasure and our honor, and this story needs to be told and needs to be heard by as many people as possible because, you know, Tom and I said that we have a commitment to the truth. When we started this show, we looked at each other and said, we're not going to allow anybody to come on here and spread disinformation, intentional lies, nonsense. It's going to be the truth, even if it hurts. And we've had shows that people have come back at us and been angry. Well, we want the truth to come out. Let's set the stage, if you don't mind, this morning, Billy. Tell us about your son, Aaron.
I can tell you that Aaron was the kind of boy that every parent's dream of having. I can never remember him disrespecting us. He was a polite boy, a polite man, very humble, and very fearless at the same time. I mean, he could go from completely, quiet and innocent, so to speak, 180 degrees. If he saw or heard of injustice or saw something going on, you know, Aaron was he was the kind of guy that if something was wrong, he wanted to right it. He wanted to make it right. He grew up wanting to be a Navy SEAL. When we lived on a farm in Tennessee when Aaron was young, and I can remember one Saturday afternoon we were out working on a fence, had the radio on, and the radio was saying something, and Aaron was probably about 7, 8 years old, was saying something about Army Rangers and some kind of op that had been done, and Aaron told me right then, he said, "Dad, I want to be an Army Ranger when I grow up." And I told him, I said, "Well, son," and I say this reluctantly because I'm not a military guy, but I said to him, I said, "Son, there's another group that's a little bit higher, a little bit more trained or whatever, you know, I choose my words carefully here, than the Army Rangers, because I respect those guys very much." And I said, "But that's Navy SEALs." And we talked a little bit about Navy SEALs, and from that day on, when people asked Aaron what he was going to do, who he was going to be when he grew up, and he said, "I'm going to be a Navy SEAL," and that was his dream. And he grew up saying that all the way through high school, but in his senior year, on the last practice on Thursday night before the season opened that Friday night, Aaron tore his ACL, and he had to miss his entire senior football season here in Martin County. And he had surgery, and probably a couple months after he had that surgery, he was out playing a pickup game of basketball, and he tore that ACL again. This time, the surgeon told us when he came out to talk to us after the surgery, he said the surgery was not successful. And he said, from now on, Aaron, if he does anything very physical at all, he's going to have to wear a special brace to jog or any kind of sports, anything like that. Aaron knew that his hope of being a Navy SEAL was over. And he was very disappointed, but he graduated high school, went to work at Jupiter Island Club golf course here close to where we live, and went ahead and went to school and got a degree in golf course management. Was going on with his life, and then 9/11 happened. And as so many thousands of men and women ran to that call that day who were not in the military, Aaron was one of those. On his birthday, June 24th, 2002, Aaron came in that night and told me and his mom at the supper table, said, "Today I joined the SEAL Challenge program." And I told him, I said, "Son, you can't make it as a Navy SEAL. And if you don't make it, you're going to be stuck on a boat." He said, "Dad, if God wants me to make it, I'll make it." And he did. He and his mom, she started coaching him in special exercises to build that muscle up around that knee and through there. And he left that November, winter hell week in Coronado, and he made it. And in fact, his name is on the wall there as first time, every time through all the evolutions. No one in the Navy ever knew that his ACL was torn until he went to DevGru on the East Coast, and there was a screening process, and I saw it in his papers after he died, and he told them, it asked if he had any surgery, and he told them what it was, and they still didn't call him. He made it to SEAL Team 6, and he was a member of SEAL Team 6 Gold Squad on the night of August 6, 2011, in the early morning hours when Extortion 17 was shot down, along with 16 other Navy SEALs and 5 SEAL Team 6 support and 5 Army and National Guard and Army and National Guard Aviation and 3 Air Force Special Forces.
You know what? Before we get, obviously we're going to get to the mission, but there's people in this world who are just meant to be, whatever it might be. And God's will takes over from physical stuff, mental stuff, and God's will is to have special people like him in special groups. Now, just a quick background, to everyone out there. You have SEAL teams and you have DevGru. SEAL team operators are the best in the world. Now take the best of that world and put them on one team. And that's what DevGru is. That's how special that is. And for him to get there with that care, is insane to think about. But, what an accomplishment and support system he had with you and your wife is even more special. But August 6th in Afghanistan, take us through this devastating mission of any conversation you had with Aaron beforehand, and then just take us through what happened, Billy, with that operation, and then we'll, go from there.
Okay. Now, we didn't have any conversation with Aaron before the op that evening. And I had actually talked to Aaron, as I was recalling with Karen here a few months ago. I'd actually talked to Aaron, I believe, on the Thursday before he got killed on that Saturday morning. And so I was in British Columbia, Vancouver, British Columbia, that morning, woke up, heard on Fox News that there had been a chopper shot down in Afghanistan, and that 31 Americans were on board, and there were no survivors. And they gave an update every few minutes, and as the updates came, it got more specific. Then it was special forces, then it was special operations, then it was special operations working with Afghan commandos, and then last it came special operations working with Afghan commandos in the Tanya River Valley. I knew that's where Aaron and his team were operating. And at that time, I called Karen, and I back in Florida, and I told her what I'd heard, and asked her, see if you could get some information. She started calling, trying to get a hold of Aaron's buddies, and she obviously not on that squad, but other buddies that he had. And she couldn't get a hold of any of them. Well, come to find out, they wouldn't take the calls. And later, and I also called my oldest daughter. We have two daughters, Anna, our youngest, and Tara, our oldest. And Tara was married and had two children of her own at that time, two small children. Anna was just a teenager. And I called Tara and I told her what I knew. And I said, "Why don't you go over and be with Mom? She's there by herself." I had spent the night at a friend's house, and she started crying. And I said, "Honey, there's nothing to cry about. I'm sure everything's going to be all right." But she's there alone. So she went over, and in 30 minutes or so, Tara called me, and she was crying, and she said, "Daddy, he's dead." And she had not called me daddy in I don't know how many years, because she was grown, and kids quit that when they're young, and she'd call me dad. But that morning it was, "Daddy, he's dead." And the weird thing, all I could say is, "Okay, baby, I'll call you back." And I hung up the phone, and I'm told that Karen we had other conversations Karen and I had between that. She had told me that she had talked to Alan, who was Aaron's father-in-law, Aaron's wife, his widow, and two small children were staying with her mom and dad while he was deployed, and he had a young daughter that was just a few weeks old. And so she had called Alan, told Alan what she was seeing on TV, and to warn him that, if Aaron's widow happened to get up and see, maybe she didn't need to see it on TV. And so in a short while, Alan called back and told Karen. He said, "Karen, it's bad." And she said, "I know it's bad. It's all over Facebook and everything." He said, "No, Karen, you don't understand. The Navy is here right now, and Aaron was on the chopper, and there are no survivors." I'm told by my daughter, at that point, Karen dropped the phone and began to run through the house, and just crying and screaming at the top of her lungs that we do not grieve as those who have no hope. And that was coming out of her. That wasn't her planning to say that. And if you know that scripture from the Apostle Paul in the Bible, that we as believers do not grieve as those that have no hope, but we do grieve. And we grieve heavily, just as anybody else, because death is tragic. But anyway, that's what Karen was saying. And after about 5 minutes, Tara told her, she said, "Mom, we got to call Dad." And that's when Tara called me. And so at that time, I immediately had friends calling, and one of them, Al Martin, bought me a ticket from Seattle Airport. I drove down to Seattle Tacoma Airport, and to fly me back direct flight to West Palm. And another friend of mine, Jim McLaughlin here in Florida, called me and said he was going to fly out and drive my vehicle back to Florida. So as I sat in the airport that afternoon, I heard my mom's voice on CNN TV in the airport, and I heard her talking. I looked at the screen, and there was picture of Aaron on the TV, and my mom was talking about that she had talked to him before he deployed, and he said, "Mom," he said, "Granny, I'm a Christian," and he said, I'm not worried if something happens." He said, I know we're all spend eternity," and Aaron was he He was a serious. Aaron didn't do anything halfway. Everything he did, he was serious about it. He was a serious believer, and he was very humble. If you ever ask Aaron, what do you do? He would tell you he was in the military. He's not going to tell you that he's Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6, anything else like that. You had to get to know him, not just a general conversation. And after Aaron died, we had other Navy SEALs tell us. One's quote was, Aaron was a light in a world of darkness to us all. We had other SEALs. I had another Navy SEAL tell me, we don't understand why it was Aaron. He's the one who should have lived. He was a believer. He was better than us. And you know what? God makes those decisions. We don't. And quite frankly, God has used Aaron's life and his death for much good in this world. And so I flew back home. Our family, my wife Karen and my son-in-law Adam were waiting on me at PBI that morning. And when we got there, we were all very haggard. And I remember my wife in a T-shirt and a pair of shorts, and obviously we're broken, but we went to church and we worshiped that morning. And I'll never forget, as we walked in the church, straight from the airport, my daughters and met us there, and we walked in, and they were singing "How Great Thou Art." And it was the hardest day in our life. It was the hardest day I hope we'll ever have. But I can't imagine anything more. And that day we were flown to D.C. by NBC, be on the Today Show the next day, and then on Fox News the next morning. And the bodies obviously were flown back to Dover, and it all happened very fast. They told us it would be days before they got them back, but then I think by Tuesday afternoon they were back in Dover.
I think I can speak for Tom, and I know I can speak for anybody listening to this. Our hearts break for what you and your family have endured since that day.
Thank you, Dan, and I appreciate that. But there are thousands and thousands of families, across this country who have experienced what we have in our country's longest war, by the way.
No, and I get that, and I'm not trying to minimize anyone's loss, but you're here with us now, and you're telling a story that is and everybody needs to know the dedication and commitment, not just that our service members make, but that their families make. Their families are involved in this every step of the way. The roller coaster ride of emotions, hoping they're okay, not being able to hear everything about what's going on for security reasons. And then to get this devastating news, I can't thank you enough for sharing the story, that piece of the story, the deeply personal piece of it. Your son sounds like he was beyond a Navy SEAL. He was an incredible human being who the world was better off with him in it. But as you said, God has a plan. God has a purpose. God knows why he does everything. He leaves it up to us to have faith in his plan. And that isn't always easy.
He does. He does. And we don't get to make those. Obviously, we don't get to make those choices, and I understand why we don't. If I had known that day would come, I'd have done everything I could in the 30 years that we had him to change that day and not enjoy the gift that God had given us, for 30 years. And you said that that Aaron he looked like he was more than a Navy SEAL. He'll always be my boy, but I can tell you this. This is what I've said about Aaron. Aaron wasn't a warrior because he became a Navy SEAL. He became a Navy SEAL because he was a warrior. And that warrior's heart was that boy.
I think that statement, I think, is going to sum this entire interview up for sure. Not that it's ending right now, but I think that says everything. That's some line, Billy. That's something.
And that combined with what you said that his fellow SEALs said about him, who knew him very well. You work in those kind of conditions with people, you know each other really well. For them to say that he was a light in a dark world, that is really saying something. He was living out his faith in every way that he could. And as a parent, That's what we want for our children, right? And
That's absolutely right. I'll never forget Chaplain Bradshaw, who was a chaplain there at Devondre, told Karen and I at Dover. He said, "If I had 5 men like Aaron, I could conquer the world." And when something like this happens, what you think about your children and what you hope that your children are doing and all this. But when other people say things about them, like I heard said about Aaron, it means so much more than what you think,
Absolutely. So, Billy, let me ask you this. When Dover happens, when do you and your family, when do you start getting the particulars about what happened? And even more than a kind of a part two to this, when does it start to not make sense of what you were getting told?
Okay, so it came out immediately on TV that the Navy SEALs were flying in to rescue the Rangers, and that was completely false. And by the way, that's still a story that many Navy SEALs and many people believe today. But it's just not true. In October, I think on October 23rd, the families were taken into Little Creek Base there in Virginia and given a debriefing about what they wanted us to know about what happened that night. And Brigadier General Jeffrey Colt led the investigation from Fort Campbell. He was a helicopter expert. The investigation had members of the Navy and of the Air Force, and obviously the Army. And he held it for the families. He was the lead investigator, and he told us that they were flying on a CH-47 that night. We already knew that, and there were questions about that. Why were they flying on that chopper doing a nighttime assault mission? When our military has the Night Stalkers who fly MH-47s and other special Blackhawks, to deliver those troops, those special operations and special forces into battle and do nighttime assaults. So there was a question there about it. And so as General Colt began to explain, and he told us that, Karen and I were sitting close to front, and I asked him, "Sir, why were they flying on a CH-47?" And he said, "Because we don't have enough MH-47s." And I said, "I understand from the internet that we have 60." And he told me, he said, "That's the correct number, the MH-47s." But he went ahead and said, "But the CH-47 is just as capable as the MH-47. These were the first things, these are the kind of things that you begin to hear, And in fact, this was the CH-47D. It was built as a CH-47C back in the 60s and retrofitted to a D in the 1980s, this specific helicopter. He also told us that there was no pre-assault fire laid down that night as the chopper began to come into the landing zone because of the rules of engagement. And he told us that the AC-130 overhead had witnessed what they believed to be 3 RPGs fired from a tower, from a calotte. And the first RPG missed, the third one missed, but the second one, according to the investigation, made contact with one of the rear rotor blades and knocked off about 10 feet of it, which caused the chopper to go into a terrible spin. And it was estimated it was 100 to 150 feet off the ground when this happened, and that it spun around, and some were thrown out, and everybody was killed immediately. I believe, recollection, that there were 6 thrown out, and 3, I believe, the best I remember, 3 Americans, 3 Afghanis. It could have been 6 Americans and 3 Afghans, but I believe I've got those numbers correct. That they were thrown out of the chopper, and so those, the fact that we didn't have pre-assault fire, the fact that we didn't take, because the AC-130 in their, I'll get to that in a little. That's what we learned that day at the debriefing. And one of the fathers asked, why didn't we use a drone strike that night? And I'm not saying that we should have or shouldn't have, but he did ask. And I'll never forget Admiral Forward, an Admiral Navy SEAL, turned to the crowd of grieving parents and widows and said, because we want to win their hearts and minds. And that was really hard to take that morning. My son and other men and women who joined after 9/11 didn't join to win hearts and minds. They joined to destroy the enemy that had attacked the United States of America.
I can't even imagine how you have felt hearing something like that. So, in some of the reading I've done about this, one of the things I've seen, and you can correct me if it's wrong, apparently there's a military leader who told people very soon after the downing of Extortion 17 that they were certain that there was no leak from the Afghans commandos on that helicopter. And as an investigator, that struck me as a little odd. How do you know that? How can you say that? Because I think there's a lot of speculation. And I remember a previous conversation with you. Who were these Afghan commandos? Was this a setup? Did they leak information about it? How did the enemy know exactly where this helicopter was going to land in the middle of the night in this remote area? This is the lucky shot. All this stuff it just doesn't ring true. So is that a true statement? Were you told that?
So yes, we're absolutely told that. But because of information that I have, I'll elaborate on that for a moment. Staff Sergeant Nick Moore, he and his medic were what they believed to be first on the scene that night. They were not. But I can tell you a little bit more about that later if you want to know. But they were not. But anyway, Nick told me personally.
Are you a law enforcement officer looking to enhance your understanding of trauma-informed practices? Join Kevin Donaldson, host of the Suffering Podcast and former New Jersey law enforcement officer, alongside Sherry Alsup, a subject matter expert and survivor of long-term sexual assault, trauma, and suicide attempt, for an impactful 8-hour on-site training session. This victim-centered interactive class will provide you with the tools to approach cases with empathy and understanding, offering real-world insight from a survivor's perspective. CEUs are available, and you'll walk away better equipped to handle the complexities of trauma. Visit www.realkevindonaldson.com and www.sherryalsup.com to learn more. Empower your agency with knowledge that makes a difference. Have you ever wished you could go back in time and see the events that shape the true crime cases that fascinate you? With newspapers.com, it's like having a time machine to the past. Dive into more than 1 billion newspaper pages from 1690 to 2025 and relive the headlines that shocked entire towns. Explore newspapers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond with a simple search. Read the breaking news as it happened, crime scene reports, witness testimonies, and courtroom drama. Explore forgotten clues and see how the media shaped the narrative of infamous cases. But it's not just the major stories. Newspapers.com lets you dig into local mysteries, missing persons reports, and the small-town scandals that history forgot. It's the closest you can get to being there when it all unfolded. So, if you're ready to dig deeper into the crimes that keep you up at night, start your journey today at newspapers.com. Use the code GOLDSHIELDS for an exclusive 20% discount on your subscription.
Why the Afghans were swapped out at that afternoon, and Nick told me personally why they were swapped out. They actually were swapped at the request of one of the Navy SEALs that the liaison with Nick. In other words, from the Ranger to the SEAL team that was there on Fob Shank. These two coordinated with each other about, hey, here's what we're doing, and you know, that kind of communication. At the request, I'm told by Nick, the SEALs asked to swap the commandos that they had with the commandos that were working with the Rangers. That's what I'm told. And he gave me the reason. The reason was because the Afghans who were working with the SEALs, they were having trouble with these Afghans, and there something had occurred, and you know, these Afghans were ticked off at the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs were ticked off, and it had to do with an op, by the way, and you know, based on what Aaron had told me previously, based on what a lot of other Navy SEALs have told me since then, they had a lot of trouble with the Afghans. I mean, when they go out on an op, sometimes the Afghans wouldn't fight with them. Now, you know, this was an operation handed down by the State Department, by the administration. You have to operate with these Afghan commandos. You have to train them. And it even got worse after Aaron was killed. The directives from our generals, you have to let the Afghans lead, because we're making the Afghans upset. We're making the Afghan citizens upset. So anyway, I'm told that's why they were swapped out. But Dan, you need to understand, that does not mean there was not a leak. Because after we left that debriefing that day and went back to Florida, after we heard, and I heard it twice, about the pre-assault fire, because I asked Lieutenant Colonel, and now he's a Colonel, Matthew Grant of the Air Force. Later, I said, "Is what General Colt said correct? Is they didn't? In fact, the AC-130 had seen the shots, but the AC-130 had also requested to take out these Taliban on the ground, because as the operation took place, as the Rangers operation had taken place some way up the valley, some of the Taliban escaped out the back of the building, and the AC-130 saw them, bound their description in the military testimony, bounding down the valley tactically, going from door to door, trying to build up forces. They asked to take these out. They were denied at least three times. Some of the air force says it was more than that, but that's what's in the redacted report that we have. They were denied at least three times, that they couldn't take them out. Then, in fact, some of these same Afghans were seen loading cylindrical objects onto this clock or this tower, the same tower that they say the RPG was fired from that took down Extortion 17. So that all happened. That all led to the question you posed. Was this a setup? I absolutely 100% believe it was a setup. But I believe it was a setup because of the way that we operated there. Because what I learned from the redacted report very early on in that, and I haven't told you about the redacted report yet, what I learned from that is every operation that we were running at that time to be a legal operation had to be cleared by the AOC, the Afghan AOC of Operational Coordination Group of Afghanistan. Had to be cleared by them. We couldn't run an op if we were running it legally that the Afghan government didn't clear. Now, our warriors, our warfighters don't trust the Afghans. But our leaders never seemed to learn because they became politically correct. Karen and I have a memorandum of understanding right here in our house that was given to us by someone in intelligence that the State Department and this is not just SEALs, this is all of them, but the State Department commanded, it's signed by Hamid Karzai and the State Department, that our warriors would begin to learn the culture of the Afghans so that we could get along better over there. This is the kind of, and you know, if you know enough about Islam, you cannot, if you learn the culture of Islam and the belief of Islam, you'll never trust them in anything they do, because they practice what is called taqiyya, which means our religion lets us lie to you as long as it advances our cause. Our leaders never understood that, or if they did, they refused to believe it. But anyway, so I do believe it was a setup. I believe someone leaked it. I believe they knew they were coming in. I do believe that. I have no way to prove that. But anyway.
And this is so relevant. So everyone has an understanding of why this setup and everything that the question Dan posed and Billy just answered. After bin Laden was killed, there was a $50,000 bounty on every Navy SEAL in that area by anyone who could take them out. That's why this is so relevant of the setup and what had happened, you know, to take this flight down and the swapping out of the commandos and all that. That's why everything kind of leads back to to that and each other. That's why it's all linked up. There's so many other things, but and this is a report, so I want to get your facts about it. There were so many things about, you know, once the debris was taken care of and the soldiers started to get, you know, recovered, they were found to have bullet wounds, not just impact wounds from the crash, leading to the part of there was a firefight at some point, either on that ship or when they landed or when they crashed. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's correct. So what happened is that day at the debriefing, when the families left, we were all given a folder, and it had, you know, a summary of what we'd heard that day, but it also had a disc in it. And I came home in October and looked at the folder, didn't do much else with it. But I did speak to Congressman Tom Rooney, Congressman Allen West, about what we'd been told about the pre-assault fire and about the old helicopter. And Congressman Rooney was our congressman at that time, and he said, Billy, I'll find out, you know, try to get some answers to those two questions. And so right before Christmas of 2011, I got a handwritten letter back from Congressman Rooney, and in answering those two things, he did not mention the airframe, the old airframe, because that was one of my questions. But he did say they didn't take out the Afghans that night because they didn't know where the shots came from. And I knew that's not what we'd been told. And I called Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Grant and had him go through it with me again, and he told me exactly those things. And he said on those two things about the pre-assault fire and taking the people out coming down the valley, and then taking out the people who fired the shots. And by the way, they didn't take out the people who fired the shots, knowing where the shots came from, but they didn't know if there were also innocents there with them. So they couldn't take a chance on collateral damage. And even though we just had 30 dead Americans on the ground. But Colonel Grant told me again. I also called the Admiral over Naval Special Warfare, who was at the debriefing that day, Admiral Sean Pipus, who's retired now. And I told him what Congressman Rooney had told me. And I said, Admiral Pipus, I said, why would he say that? He said, Billy, I don't know. I heard the same things that you heard that day. And so it began to make me very suspicious at that time. Well, it just so happened that around that same time, Christmas, New Year, Charlie Strange, whose son Michael was killed on the chopper with Aaron. He was a cryptologist, one of the leading cryptologists in the world. And he called me and he said, we talked. He said, hey, Bill, you got to look at the disc. So after the phone call with Charlie, I actually went and looked at the disc, put it in the computer. There was so much information there that I printed it out. And it was about 1,250 pages. And I began to go through it. And very early on, I could see what kind of trouble that our warriors were in Afghanistan because of the directives handed down by our government. And I'm not a military expert, but it was so bad that that it was unbelievable. And Aaron had told me. He said, "Dad, we don't trust it." He said, a lot of times we'll get there on an op, they won't fight because they're friends with the people we're fighting. And he said, and they sell out to the highest bidder. And so they didn't trust them. And I found out after Aaron got killed, none of the guys, Rangers, SEALs, Delta Force, anybody I talked to, they didn't trust these Afghans, and as we know, this is off subject, but still the same subject. How many green on blues that we had in Afghanistan, and still our government didn't take away the risk to our warfighters. But anyway, as I looked through it, and I saw that the interviews that they did, like with the AC-130 crew, that's where I got my information. I right straight from the redacted report, and I also saw that in there the Pathfinder commander testified. The Pathfinder group, in case you don't know, is they are supposed to be the first ones to a crash site of a helicopter. And they're the ones trained. They're the experts. What happened? We got to get the black box. We got to do this and that. And so in his interview, he was asked, so what were you tasked to do when you got there? He said, "Sir, we were supposed to get the black box." "Did you retrieve the black box?" "No, sir, we did not. It was too hot that night, and overnight a flood came and washed away the black box." In fact, this is the only helicopter crash in Afghanistan where we've never retrieved the black box. And Don Brown, who's a friend of mine, wrote a book later on. He's an author and has written many books, but he wrote the book call sign Extortion 17. In his book, he had done the research. At that time of the shoot down of Extortion 17, there had been 52 helicopter crashes in Afghanistan. And it could have been Afghanistan and Iraq, but I think it was Afghanistan. But anyway, during our war on terror. And in fact, almost 50% of those had been CH-47s. And guess what? They retrieved the black box off all of them. So that in itself was very suspicious. They had told us at the debriefing, because one of the fathers asked, in fact, I believe it was Charlie Strange who asked, but I could be incorrect now, but asked, "What about the black box?" And General Colt told us it was washed away in the flood. Now, that's the story that the Department of Defense, that the Pentagon went by for almost 3 years, until there was a congressional hearing in D.C. that Karen and I were at, and when Deputy Secretary of Defense Gary Reed was asked by Congressman Chaffetz, well, we were told, or the story is, the black box was washed away in a flood. And Reed said, well, it's not true. The chopper never had a black box. It's too old to have a black box. And it only had the analog. It has the analog. It has the black box up by the engine that records the performance of the engines, but not any audio. And Karen and I were asked to be on Fox News the next morning. And so I said what Gary Reed had said under oath. And before we left D.C., I got 3 phone calls from people that I know in D.C. and one in North Carolina. And all of them said, those choppers all have black boxes. The CH-47s have black boxes. And a few months later, a warrant officer who was stationed in Alaska at the same time, contacted Karen on Facebook and wanted to talk to us. And she gave him my phone number, and we exchanged numbers, and we talked, and he told me, he said, "Mr. Vaughn," he said, "the chopper absolutely had a black box on it." He said, "I've even checked with my crew. We flew it from Fort Bragg down to Savannah before it went over, and it had a black box." And I said, "Jay, are you talking about the black box up by the engines?" He said, "Mr. Vaughn, I'm talking about the black box that is orange, that's beside the seat that records the audio." He said the chopper had one. And in later conversation, even with, and I believe the guy's name's Tom Hunt. I know his first name, but he talked to Tom Hunt, and Tom said, "I flew that chopper 2 days before the shoot down. There was a black box on that chopper." So why they lied about the black box, I have no idea. But look, when you lie about simple things, then you get suspicious of great things, okay? And they just lied about everything. Go ahead.
So, what I was just going to interject, I remember being at the crash of Flight American Airlines Flight 587 in Queens in 2001. And part of my unit's task was to work with the FAA to help find the two orange black boxes, the voice and data recording boxes. There was one of each. And if you want to know what happened, what conversations were held inside an aircraft prior to it crashing, you need that. You need to know. It will tell you everything that was going on, the statements of the pilots, if there was a fight or an argument or even shooting. All that's going to be on that black box, which we know is orange. To say that it never existed, that after 3 years of saying it was washed away, come on. That's not even a good lie. It just isn't.
It's not. It's not. But it's the kind of lies that we've seen from Washington, D.C. now for years. You just eat this excrement sandwich, sit down and shut up. We don't have to have the answers for you. And Tom, one thing that you talked about a while ago, the bullets. So also at the debriefing that day, we had been told by the Navy that we could not get Aaron's autopsy because we weren't the primary. His widow was not at the debriefing that day under suggestions from the Navy. Hey, you don't want to go and hear all these gruesome details, so she didn't come. We were there, and the KCO, who was sitting next to my wife from the Navy, who had told us, no, you can't get Aaron's autopsy. But when Brigadier General Colt spoke about the autopsies, again, we were sitting right there, and I asked him, I said, sir, could I get my son's autopsy? And he said, yes, I'll have you talk to Lieutenant Colonel Grant after this is over with. Well, by the way, we got it. There was no problem getting the autopsy from them. And that's how Colonel Grant and I, we talked a lot over the next few months. And so anyway, when we got Aaron's autopsy, we read it and we looked at it. And in Aaron's autopsy, it described that his body had cook-off rounds in it, bullets. It also described a piece of gray metal that they couldn't determine where it came from, and so we knew that we knew it had the cook-off rounds, but so that Aaron's body was trapped in the chopper as most of the rest of them were and burned. But so in some time later, weeks or whatever, I talked again with Charlie Strange, and I told him I had Aaron's autopsy. How'd you get Aaron's autopsy? And I told him, and so I gave him the number that I had, and Charlie was able to obtain his son's autopsy. Well, when we asked for Aaron's autopsy, they asked us, "Do you want pictures?" We didn't want pictures because we knew that he was burned. And so we didn't get pictures. Charlie, on the other hand, was not asked, did not ask. When he got the pictures of his son, there was his son laying in the field, and he wasn't burned at all. But guess what was in his body? Cook-off rounds, just like it was in Aaron's. That's what his autopsy says. So again, when you find one thing and they lie about it, and then you find other things that don't make sense, it just goes on and on and on, that. And by the way, Brigadier General Colt had told us that day, he told us that the reason for the operation was a quick reactionary force, that the Rangers were not in trouble. In fact, their op was already over with, and that the SEALs were going in to capture some of those who had escaped down the valley, and they thought one of them may be Kari Tahir, who was the subject of the whole operation called Operation Electric Grove, and that's why they went out that night. I don't believe that's why they went out that night. I've learned a lot since then. I've learned a lot from other people, and I believe their mission was a standalone mission that night, and I don't know what we need to. Let me also tell you. Do you know about the ramp ceremony?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Okay, go. Y'all ask the questions. Y'all ask the questions, and I'll let you.
No, no, you just teed it up. So go on with the ramp ceremony. That was
when the caskets came in, there were all the Afghans were brought back to the United States with the Americans. And 8 Afghan caskets, and we were told as families they had to be brought back so they could be identified. And we were told by other people, experts, they can identify a body anywhere in the world through DNA. They didn't have to bring them back to the United States. So we don't know why they brought them back to the United States, but they did. And at Bagram Air Base, they put a random 8 Islamic Republic of Afghanistan flags over the bodies, and we were told that it made the Navy SEALs who flew back with the bodies extremely upset. And in the plane, they put American flags on all the bodies. But when they arrived at Dover, indeed, 8 that came in front of the families had Afghan flags on. So it's very high probability that some of the American warriors, possibly even my son, had flag draped over his body of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Again, no consideration for the war fighters, the families, or American citizens. None whatsoever. But sit down and shut up. Don't ask any questions. Then, in January of 2013, Admiral William McCraven came to our house because he and I had gotten crossways at the Navy SEAL Museum up here in Fort Pierce, just above where we lived, in November of that year. And so he wanted to come. They'd asked me twice to come over to SOCOM over at Tampa, and I in the next month or two, and I had said both times, yeah, okay, I'll come, but I didn't come. And quite frankly, I didn't trust him. I mean, I just have to say, I just didn't trust him at all. And so then his chief of staff called and said, hey, Admiral McCraven would like to come to your house and talk to you, Mrs. Vaughn, if that's okay. I said, absolutely, come on. So they came over on a Friday. He and Chris Ferris, his sergeant major, and his liaison, and 2 security, and security stayed outside, and but they came in, and the first thing Admiral McCraven did was apologize, and for us having crossed words. We came in and we sat down at the table, and he said the first words out of his mouth when we sat down was, the 4 of us, Karen, my wife, McCraven, Mr. Ferris, and myself, is I just want you to know that the military will never lie to a family who's lost a loved one. And my wife, just sitting there nonchalantly, says, well, and what about Pat Tillman? And I'm telling you, McCraven came up on the table with his elbows, his face as red as a beet, screamed, what about Pat Tillman? It was just a case of friendly fire. And we all just sat there with our mouths open, including Mr. Ferris, because, yeah, okay, it was friendly fire, but you lied about it for 2 years. And so it kind of set the tone for the meeting that day. And, we had gone through the redacted report, and I had a lot of questions for McCraven that day that he wouldn't or couldn't answer. And I say that he couldn't answer because he would give an answer. But, 5 or 6 times I had to say, well, sir, according to the redacted report, it says this. And then he had no answer. Same with, it was just the same with the helicopter. Why were they using the yellow helicopter? Well, the helicopter's fine. Well, according to the aviation expert in the redacted report, he said, this is his words, it's a regular trail of tears. We've been telling our higher-ups for a long time that something like this is going to happen. But it was just one thing after another. And finally, Mr. Ferris, Chris Ferris, asked us, he said, did you guys get the ramp ceremony by any chance? And Karen said, I don't believe any of the families got it. And he said, I'll get you one. And so in about 2 weeks went by, and we hadn't received it. And Karen emailed him, and he said, it's been a lot of red tape to get the ramp ceremony. I'll send you mine. And indeed, we got it just a day or two later. And in the ramp ceremony, we saw, it was a, very solemn ceremony, a prayer by an American chaplain. And right after that, an Afghan began to speak. An Afghan imam or an Afghan commander or whatever, he began to speak. And both of us looked at each other and said, hey, we need to know what he's saying. And so my wife took only his words off of the video, and we sent them to a Middle East expert. This was on Saturday afternoon. We watched it on Saturday morning. By Sunday afternoon, this man got back with us on a phone call and told us what he was saying, and he said it damned the Americans to hell. The Americans were the losers. The Muslims were the winners. The Americans were fodder for hellfire. And so, as you can imagine, that this was it was outrageous to us. And then right after that, and I can tell you, going back to Mr. Ferris. Mr. Ferris said that day in the meeting with McCraven, he said, I just want to tell you that an Afghan was allowed to speak that day at the ramp ceremony, and your son's teammates were very upset. Well, they were very upset because there were hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans at that American base, at that ramp ceremony, many of them knowing what this Afghan was saying because they understood the language. But General Votel, right after the Afghan got done, talked about how we're all brothers in arms and how great the Afghans are and how they work together in the fight and all. He didn't have a clue. Again, he didn't have a clue. Again, the leaders commanding our guys didn't have a clue of what had just taken place. We took the video to D.C. We met with Congressman Michelle Bachmann, Congressman Louis Gohmert, and they listened to it, and they said, well, we're going to have it interpreted for ourselves to know if this is what it's really saying. So indeed they did. They came back with the same thing. Glenn Beck's people had it interpreted, all came back with the same thing. So some of the families held a press conference at the National Press Club in D.C. My wife played the video. All she did was play the video, what the military had put out themselves. And it hit the fan. And I told some of the things that McCraven's own words that he had said at the House that day. And indeed it did. And then the Pentagon came out and said, well, we talk to Afghans and they give an entirely different interpretation. Well, according to Fox News, Afghan Middle Easterners they talked to said there are several funeral messages that Muslims can give. This is one of the worst. So there are other things that he could have said that day, but indeed he said this. And so there again, just another one of the things showing you that our military leaders or our government cares. They care nothing about our warfighters. They care nothing about the families.
This is, if you're listening to this show, and I hope you are, because you wouldn't hear me if I didn't say that, I hope that you're as disgusted and outraged as I am. I know Tom is too. We're both shaking our heads listening at this is beyond the pale. This is not a little slight oversight. This is not bureaucratic mistakes. This is the intentional policy of the U.S. government and the military in 2011 to bend over backwards and to throw U.S. servicemen and women under the bus, lose their lives if necessary, to maintain an agenda or a positioning or a stance that you want to have. This is disgusting to me, and I'm so sorry that your son was lost in this and that it was treated the way it has been treated by the military afterwards. You know, they say when it came to Watergate, it wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up, right? You know, things happen in battle, and people can accept that. What they can't accept is their government setting up a position or a situation where these things can happen, number one, and two, then lying about it afterwards. That's the crime here. And I'm so sorry you and your family are still suffering from loss from this great man. This is disgusting. This needs to change in our country. I'm praying that Pete Hegseth will turn the Department of Defense around, that Marco Rubio will turn the State Department around, that President Trump will turn our U.S. foreign policy around. This should never happen in our country.
I agree, Dan. And let me tell you, I need to tell you, in the redacted report, and you guys probably know what this is. I didn't at the time until I read it, but there's something in there called the chronological time of events. And it happened from the time Extortion 17 was shot down and went on for days until the cleanup was complete. The chopper was shot down at 2:39:36 a.m.
Patriot is a premium whiskey hard seltzer. We've carefully crafted 4 flavors that not only taste exceptional, but can be enjoyed on any occasion, anytime. We're committed to giving back 5% of all profits to the core groups we call the backbone of America. We are proud to help those who serve our great country. This is America's Seltzer, the brand that stands for quality, community, and the American spirit.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit Streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
In that report at 3:04 a.m., an unidentified coalition group walked up on the shoot-down site at 3:04. They were there for about 40 minutes or something, like 45 minutes. 5 minutes after they left, and it says they came up and surveyed the site. 5 minutes after they left, now, I can't say that the Pathfinder group was held up while they were there. What I can say is this is what the report says. It gives the time that they left. 5 minutes later, in the chronological time of event, it makes the statement the Pathfinder group was allowed to launch. So they weren't allowed to launch for some nearly 1 hour after the chopper was shot down. Now, that is in the chronological time of events. It's also in the chronological time of events that Taliban, who were captured in and or around the shoot-down, testified when they were interrogated that there was a group, a coalition group, that walked up the road, walked up an undisclosed road. That's what it says. So there's those two accounts. The military denied this. And by the way, this was not in General Colt's report. In General Colt's report, that's right out, and I am told by military people, whatever's in that report, whatever's in that chronological time of events cannot be changed. It cannot be erased. It cannot be taken out. And it's there, but it was not in Colt's report. In Colt's report, the first people to arrive at the site were the Army Rangers who were on the ground, nearly 2.5 hours later. That's the first group that arrived on the site. And shortly after that, the Pathfinder group arrived. That's what the Colt's report to Mattis says. That group was totally left out. The military denied that happened. So, I knew it was there, but everybody, including, I told you all ago, Nick Moore, who was the staff sergeant from the Rangers on the ground. Nick is like, yeah, we're the first ones on. We're the first ones there. Nobody was there before us. So, a couple of years ago, a serviceman that I met that I'd never met before, and I met him in Atlanta, gave me a flash drive, and I asked him as we were, and he had told my wife, I want to meet Mr. Vaughn when he comes to Atlanta, and he said I have something for him, and he did when we met, introduced herself. He handed me a flash drive, and I looked at him and I said, "Sir, have you looked at this flash drive?" And he said, "I have not." I did not ask him where it came from. I did not ask him anything else about it. But Don Brown and I were there for the filming of Fallen Angel. And Don and I took it back to the hotel that night, and we looked at it. And it is the gun feed of the AH-64 helicopters overhead. And it doesn't show the shoot down because they weren't looking at it when the shoot down happened, but immediately when it's shot, it goes to it, and then it stays on it for like an hour later. Into that, you can hear them talking to each other, just like anything we would see. You can hear everything that's going on, all the radio chatter, the pilots, the two crews talking to each other about what's going on, what they see on the ground. All of a sudden, one of them, and by the way, almost exactly the same time as the chronological time of events explains it, says to the other, "Hey, do you see the friendlies walking up on the crash site?" And the other said, "Yeah, I see that." So they went on with a regular conversation, and some 45 minutes later, one of them says to the other one, he said, "Hey, I noticed that the friendlies have left the crash site." And the other one says something you can't understand. The first one comes back and says, "Well, I understand if you don't want to talk about it." So they were there. They were there. It's in the official report. It's on that gun feed. They were there. Now, the question is, it's always been a question of mine when I read it in the chronological time of events. You've got 30 Americans dead on the ground. Why would fellow warriors walk up to the site, stay there 45 minutes, and leave before anybody else gets there? It's not because they think they're unsafe, because they've stayed there 45 minutes. What did they do? Well, I believe they came and got the black box. That's what I believe. I believe that's the best that they could have done. So there's that. I know it's a fact. And as I said earlier, one other thing is I met a guy in Colorado who was a contractor there, and he told me that he had met Aaron the week of the shoot down, told me how he had met him. He described to me, I saw two guys at Bagram, actually at Jalalabad, at Bagram Air Base, and he said, I was out for a jog. They were just getting finished, and he said, I saw one of them had an orange shirt on. I suspected it might be SEALs. He said, I went up there, and he said, and he said, when I got close, it had a T on. And he said, so I knew the guy was from Tennessee. I thought the guy might be from Tennessee. I'm from Tennessee. He said, I said, hey, you from Tennessee? And he said, Aaron said, who wants to know? He said, I do. I'm from Tennessee. They struck up a conversation. They went, they did a little run together the next day. They learned what each other was doing. And this guy was there working for the agricultural department. Okay. And he was to go in and talk to, into the villages, talk to the Afghan elders and, try to talk them into not growing opium, changing over to food crops. And lo and behold, Aaron said, you know what? He said, we might be able to use you on an op we're going to do. And so they ended the conversation. A day or so later, Aaron contacted him to come down to their outpost, and their lieutenant commander there, Mark Schaefer, told this guy the same thing. I think we might be able to use you on an op. So they went on back to Fob Shank, and a couple days later, this guy's boss came in and said, hey, SEALs want you to come down to Fob Shank on something they're doing down there. You want to go down there? Yeah, I went. So he went. He arrived there, I believe, on a Thursday before the op on Friday night. But I'm telling you these things to tell you this. He says all Friday afternoon, the Rangers were planning their op, which we know was Operation Lefty Grove. That's what the military called it. But over here in another corner of Fob, the SEALs were planning an operation for that night. And I think I've leaned up against the wall here. I'm sorry. I'll have to cut that out right there. Anyway, I'm telling you this because the op was not a last-second op, like the military says. it was spun up at such a rapid speed. Now I can tell you, and I've talked to other military guys, and some, indeed, just one not long ago, who's a Delta Force guy. We went through the same thing, and at the end, he said, "I'm coming to the same conclusion you are, that this was an op altogether on its own." What happened that night? If you remember the story, what happened that night? The Rangers went out in Extortion 1-6 and 1-7. They were flown in. They were dropped off to go do their op. Extortion 1-6 and 1-7 returned to FOB, Shank. According to the AC 130 fires officer, the Rangers asked to be exfilled. This is why in fact, they argued, why are these SEALs coming in this chopper? There's no mission here. There's no mission. What's going on? The Rangers have already asked to be exfilled. Extortion 1-6 and 1-7 were sitting out there, had their orders to go pick up the Rangers. That's how much their op was over with. The Navy SEALs went out and boarded Extortion 1-7. All of them. 2 choppers were sitting there ready to go. And by the way, other men have told me that on that FOB that night, there were 2 MH-47s. One was down for maintenance, but one was ready to fly. The SEALs didn't take that. They didn't take that chopper for their op. They were doing a standalone op. They went out and all loaded on the CH-47 as 1-6 and 1-7 got ready to go and get the Rangers. The SEALs, I believe, had them drop them off, all of them on one chopper, because they thought they were undetected. 16 set out, out away from what was going on because it was empty. In fact, when the chopper was shot down, they thought back at the base at first that 1-6 had been shot down, not 1-7. That's in the redacted report. And I believe the SEALs were doing a standalone op. There were 38 people on that chopper. 17 Navy SEALs, 5 SEAL team support, 3 Air Force Special Forces, plus the 8 Afghan commandos. That's what I believe. Now, through information that I have, nobody has told me exactly that's what happened, but through picking up things that we know they weren't going to save the Rangers. The Rangers, they'd already asked to be exfilled. They were doing a standalone operation. They were going in there to do something heavy, and they had plenty of firepower and thought they were going in undetected, but somebody let them know they were coming.
You hope to God, you know what? You always hope nothing like this will ever happen, but we keep hearing stories like this, of operations that get twisted and family members getting told the wrong information and false information. And you and your family, Billy, having to now you got to become detectives and put together, information that you're gathering into your timeline and your information about what actually happened. And that's disgraceful. And Danny said, it's disgusting and disgraceful of what you, as a family member of a SEAL Team 6 member who died, you have to do this yourself, and you're not getting told the truth. And that is disgraceful, and that crap better stop now, because it's not right, it's not fair, it's not what military members and families sign up for. And you hope this government pays a little bit more attention about what's being told to family members like you in the honor of those who have fallen, and stop this nonsense from happening again.
So we have a new secretary. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Billy. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me tell you one thing. And Karen and I, and we're not detectives, but after I wrote my book, people began to come forward. And let me tell you this, not any information came from the Navy SEALs. Because I've talked to Navy SEALs after that, now that a lot of them are out. Deb Greer went around and gave them the narrative. This is the story. This is what happened. It was not even what's in the redacted report. Like I said, many of the SEALs still think, if they hadn't been corrected, that they were going to rescue the Rangers. But the information came from people like the AC 130 crew, 10th Mountain Division, who was in there to clean up the site, Rangers who were on the ground. And by the way, the 2 Troop was all killed except for 2 people. One was in the States, I'm told. His wife was having a baby. And the other one was Lieutenant Commander Mark Schaefer, who was back at the TOC Center. So the SEALs were all dead. And we were told immediately, none of the SEALs were allowed, other SEALs were allowed to go in, help with the cleanup, or even come around the site because it was too emotional. So the cleanup was done by other groups. And it has affected these people so much that it's unreal. Many have come to us and talk to us and tell us. I just had one a couple months ago, who was there and contacted my wife and said, could I talk to one of you guys? And I had a long conversation with him, and he told me after the conversation, he said, I feel so much better just getting this off my chest and talking to someone, who was affected by this. And the way that it has affected our military, and here's the other thing, not all about Extortion 17. Look how many men and women have committed suicide. It has affected our whole military, and I believe because of the way that they were told they had to fight over there, and the way they saw that their brothers and their sisters, warriors, many of them died when they were not allowed to defend themselves like they were trying to do, by the way, because of the very limited rules of engagement, tying their hands behind their back. And you know this as well as I do. But well, we've all heard the stories. And after we began to talk, countless moms talked to Karen about the way their son died. And it was one horrendous, horrible story after another. I mean, not many of them were like, my son died going in guns blazing or anything like that. It was like, my son died because there was an op going on, Afghans shot at them, and my son, an Army Ranger, contacted the TOC base and said, hey, are we allowed to shoot back? Well, not until he shoots at you again, or you can be sure that he has not laid his gun down. While he's on the radio trying to get okay to fire, he's shot in the head and he's killed. Another one, her son killed on an American base where an Afghan is in the tower. He's the guard in the tower. He has a gun, but the Americans on the base don't have guns under directive of Leon Panetta. They're not allowed to carry guns unless they need them. So when this man is shot, his buddies can't even get out and drag him off where they can protect him because they don't have guns. But the Afghan in the tower has guns. One thing after another like that. And then they come home and they deal with this. And I mean, who can expect them to be healthy after the way that our government is done?
Very, very well said about that last piece. I mean, nobody knows it better than you and your family. But, we do have a new Secretary of Defense, and I'm going to take him for now on his word that because he was in this engagement, he was in the global war on terror, he was there. He vows to return us to a state of lethality. That is what the military exists for, to kill the enemy. Not to make hearts and minds, not to do anything. That's what it exists for. But, you're an amazing storyteller, and, you do your son proud by keeping the search for the truth of what happened to him and others alive. And I cannot thank you enough for this discussion. I could speak with you for hours. I look forward to meeting with you and doing just that. But wow, Billy Vaughn, you're an inspiration to those who take situations that are terrible and then find a way to find the truth out of it. Because isn't life really about a search for the truth, right? We want the truth so much. And when our government doesn't give it...
A very famous person said, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Yeah, more than just a person, right?
That's exactly right.
God and man at once, yeah.
No. Mm.
So thank you for sharing your story. And Billy, please, I'm sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, let me tell you one other thing about Pete. Pete's a good friend of ours.
Okay.
We were invited to the hearing, and he's a war fighter. And he is, I believe that he will... he loves the military. It's his life. And I believe he will do as good a job as can be done. And one other thing, maybe you're going to ask me about Operation 300. I don't.
That was
Oh,
our closing for
you'll
sure.
have to edit that out. Then, but go ahead, Dan. I interrupted you about Pete, but Pete is he's a great friend.
No, I was just going to say that it's his job now to return us to where we need to be as a military, a fighting force to be reckoned with, feared throughout the world, peace through strength, no nonsense, uncompromising standards, and a return to faithfulness in looking out for the men and women who are out there looking for us. And that's his role. And Tom's met him, I haven't. And I have faith in him, and I hope he does what he says he will do.
Yeah, and you know what? That's another reason why they don't want Pete there. That's another reason why they don't want a lot of Trump's people there, because they're not people that they've had under their thumb who are going to go on, with status quo, and we're going to continue to do things like we've always done.
Right. So to close out this, Billy, tell us about Operation 300.
Yeah, so thank you, Tom. So in the months after Aaron died, Aaron left behind 2 kids and our family, especially my older daughter. Who's going to do with the kids what Aaron would have done with them? And she had the vision to start Operation 300, and she and I founded Operation 300. And Operation 300, it's an organization that brings in little boys and little girls who've lost their dads in the military, and sometimes moms, but it's almost always dads. And they do things with men that they would have done with their dads. They fish, they shoot, they sail, do things here in Florida, archery and those kind of things that a dad does with his children. And they come from all over the country. It was founded in November 2012. We held our first camp in April 2013. We have 6 camps. Well, we've already had 1 camp this year. We have 5 more scheduled this year. Our camps are full, all of them for 2025. We're hopefully going to have a 7th one. We got a waiting list of over 90 kids, come from all over the country. Guam, anywhere where we have service families of the military, cost them nothing to come. We also bring in the widows. They spend a nice weekend down at West Palm Beach with other widows. The kids do things at our camp here, and it's just, it's bittersweet, but it's a great thing for the kids because they come in and all the kids are just like them, and so that's
Amazing.
what we do.
What's the website? op300.org, correct?
It is. Well, sir.
Okay.
300.org. Look it up, ladies and gentlemen, and donate. Help keep this going. Help it grow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing that we've noticed, we've had the pleasure of interviewing so many Navy SEALs and some Navy SEAL families, including you, Billy. And the one thing that is always a common denominator is passing on something. They all do it. Every one of them pass on to other, surviving families, to children, to wives, to husbands. Every Navy SEAL we know that we've been involved in does that. And you're just continuing that process with Operation 300, which is amazing, which fans of ours and followers of ours will hear more about, but we'll keep that a secret for now. But
by the
listen,
way, we have this just this weekend. Actually, they're coming in today. We have 8 Navy SEALs coming in to do a SEAL shoot with people here who it's a fundraiser for Operation 300, and they come in and this is the 3rd year that we've done this now, and they take men, a lot of them old men just like me, and they teach them on all day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday how to do things that are actually they're going to shoot out of a helicopter this weekend.
Wow.
and so they buy a spot, they buy tickets, and they teach them some of the moves that they have, how to cover each other. Like maybe if one of you's getting out of a car, and something, they teach them a lot of things that are, very handy, that is just, everyday stuff to them. But anyway,
amazing.
I interrupted you, so go ahead.
No, absolutely not. It's about you and what you're doing. But you know what? We're so humbled by having you on the show, and the attention you're bringing to this Extortion 17 is needed, and it's being received very well. And we're just going to continue doing that. Push any information that's out there to get the facts out there, the facts, not what's being told, the facts of it. And you have the facts. And Billy, it is an honor to now know you, your family, the memory of Aaron, that we will hold dear to our hearts. And thank you so much for being on Gold Shields and being here with us today.
Thank you guys very much. Very humbling for you to have me on. I mean, I'm just an old guy that this is what I've learned, and I never intended to be doing what I'm doing today. It's the way a lot of us end up in life, but I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again. I know our audience is going to love this show, and we'll share with you feedback that we get. We will stay in touch with you. We want to help you with Operation 300. We want to also tell the audience how to get your book and anything else that you'd like to tell them right now that they need to know about you, your family, the things that you believe in.
Okay, so you can get the book on Amazon, and one thing you need to know about the book, it has in it what I knew at the time. The book was written in October of 2013, and my wife Karen has also written a book called World Changer. It's about raising Aaron, and from a mother's perspective, it's a lot different from my book, and she and you can get hers on Amazon too. She tells what it was like for him to grow up, with his family and with his sisters and everything, and who he was, a lot about who he was, and you can get both those books there. But I said Aaron was a believer. Our family, we're a family of believers. None of us are perfect, but we have a perfect Savior, and try to honor him. And with me, the biggest person who gets in the way of Jesus is Billy. I mean, that's who gets in the way of his mission. So I'm trying to help that, and but I'm very, very proud, very thankful of our family. We have 6 grandkids, 2 daughters, and 2 son-in-laws, and Karen and I have been married now 44 years, and she's the one that knows all the bad about you, and it's funny how they can. Well, I told General Boykin, I'm sure y'all know who General Boykin is. General Boykin and I were talking one day, and I said, it's funny how your wife is the person who can say all the things to you that your mother wanted to say but loved you too. I love her dearly, and she's my best friend.
That is so true. Wow, what an ending. What an ending to a show. That message of your family and strength and unity and fight. That is for sure. This is a special time in our show that we say thanks and say a prayer to our military vets, our law enforcement vets, and all the families, because the families go through it too. Not just stories like this, but on an everyday basis when our operators, our officers leave that house, the families stay at home, but they're with them in their hearts, and we have to pray for them as well because they go through the same thing. So please, when you see them in a store, say thank you, give them a pat on the back, give them a wave, because that means the world to them of what they're going through. And remember, they all volunteer to do what they're doing, and they all volunteer to keep us safe every single day. So please keep them all in your prayers. As always, this time, follow us on all our audio channels, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, every one of them, youtube.com/@goldshields, and our website, thegoldshieldshow.com. For my partner, Dan Murphy, for an incredible, unforgettable guest and strong as hell, Billy Vaughn. This is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone, please stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.